Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special edition of India Dialogues. May I request all of you to please rise for the national anthems, please.
अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you all. Thank you. Our distinguished guest tonight, Shri Rahul Gandhi ji, Honorable Dr. Sam Pitroda, our Chairman Suresh Kumar sir, members of the Governance Board, dignitaries, and honorable members of IBPC. To begin with our program, I would request distinguished Governor, Mr. M.A. Yusuf Ali sir, to please come on stage and present the floral welcome to Rahul Gandhi ji. Now may I request distinguished Governor Dr. Azad Mupan sir to please come forward and present the floral welcome to. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Dr. Azad Mupan sir. To distinguish guest, Dr. Sam Pitroda, sir. Thank you, sir. To begin, thank you, Dr. To begin with the program, now I hand over the mic to our chairman, Mr. Suresh Kumar sir. Thank you so much.
Rahulji, welcome to the UAE, welcome to Dubai and the IBPC, which is the Indian Business and Professional Council. It's the largest and strongest business organization comprising businessmen and professionals across a number of economic sectors, business sectors. And it's also the only authorized institution by the local government here. So welcome, and your visit is timely because it's come on the strength of a number of initiatives that the UAE government has taken to forge closer relationship with India. And India is the largest single nationality in terms of the resident population here. So it is a very important contributor And many of those that you see in the audience here have literally built Dubai in terms of creating the foundation, the infrastructure, in terms of contributing to businesses and professionals over a century now. And I think where we would like to hear from you specifically is your message for the NRIs. And we have read a lot in the local press. In fact, the last few days, the local press has covered it extensively. They've had interviews with you, with Dr. Sam Petroda. So therefore, specifically, there are two issues that are matters of concern here. One is much closer connectivity between the NRI community and India, the Indian government, the Indian authorities. And very specifically, there has been a suggestion that perhaps one of the nominated members of the Rajya Sabha should be an NRI. And so it's an interesting suggestion, important suggestion, and I hope you will support it if there is a constitutional amendment that is needed. And the second, of course, is during Dr. Manmohan Singh's time, there was a ministry for overseas Indians that was created, and it did very well. Arguably, I'm not very sure whether a politician from India is the best person to head that ministry. I hope one of these days it'll be an NRI from around the globe. There are lots of leadership here that will come in. So I'd like your views on that, Rahulji.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's an honor for me to come not only to this function, but to Dubai. I think our community has played a tremendous role here. Everybody knows and understands the contribution of our community. And I think there's been a partnership between the government of Dubai, the leaders of Dubai, and the people of India. And that partnership has been very successful. So it's an honor for me to come and see what our people have helped create in Dubai. Most of you have come without a huge amount of wealth. Most of you have come here as entrepreneurs. So you have started from scratch and you've built huge empires. So I'd like to congratulate you on that and also tell you that I'm very proud of what you have achieved as individuals. On the relationship between NRIs and the Indian government, I'm all for representation of NRIs back home. So I would push these type of ideas. I would have to go into them in a little bit of detail, but instinctively, I would push them. My sense is that in the 21st century, our diaspora, whether it's in Dubai, in the UAE, America, Canada, Europe, Japan, our diaspora is a strategic asset. And we must view it as a strategic asset. And if we view you and think of you as a strategic asset, then you have to be part of a conversation that is taking place back home about how India moves forward. So I'm pretty keen to engage with you, understand what are the type of things that you would like us to do, and look forward to trying to do as many of them as possible.
In the same context, UAE has been a major investor in India, especially in the last few years, especially in the infrastructure in India, both physical infrastructure as well as social and commercial infrastructure, namely education, healthcare, agri-processing, related to logistics, cold storage chain. For instance, DP World, a very large organization based in Dubai, has invested $1 billion to create cold chain from Jammu to the ports of Mumbai, so that the farmer's produce is carefully preserved and brought to the port. Wastage in India in food sector, for instance, is about 19%. So cold storage, cold chain achieves that objective, and that requires significant amount of investments, which is coming through as a joint venture with the National Infrastructure Investment Fund in India. And there have been significant investments from Abu Dhabi, from ADIA, and a number of NRI businessmen have invested. When you have elections, and in the run-up to the elections, the coalition talk, discussions, etc., create some uncertainty. So one of the things that investors are looking for is stability, policy continuity, consistency, making sure that this is not a political football, this is not a party politics. This is above that. This is long-term investments. This is investments which will create assets, strategic assets in India, as you mentioned. So how can you give assurances that policy continuity, policy improvement, supporting to investments will continue to happen?
Well, two things. One, you can have a look at our record. We're the people who liberalized in the 90s. We're the people who provided tremendous growth in the first decade of this century. And that's our instinct. We are a open-minded, plural type of idea, and we want to engage with our people abroad. So that, emotionally, that's where we are. Frankly, if you look at the trajectory of India, and you look at what has been happening since the 90s, there is a particular momentum that is there. And it is deeper than simply one political party's view or another political party's view. There is a sort of, India is not a tiny country, India is a big country. And when India begins to move in a direction, it has a particular momentum and a particular weight. So that will always be there. You're not going to get any significant, dramatic shift in the direction in which India is heading. I have one complaint though, which is quite obvious to me, and I don't know if you get the same sense. When you're running a country like India, there are the tactical things that you will always do, right? But India's strength, and if you look over the last 60, 70 years, India's strength comes from the strategic moves that our country makes. What do I mean by that? I mean the first strategic move, frankly, in the modern era is independence from the British. So let's put that aside. But I mean things like the Green Revolution. I mean things like the White Revolution. I mean things like liberalization as an idea. Sam sitting here, I mean things like the technological revolution or the telecoms revolution. I remember when I was a little boy and India started to talk about computers. I mean, it was considered to be a joke. Yesterday or day before yesterday, I met Mr. Anwar, who's been in the politics of Malaysia for many years. And he was telling me that, you basically moved faster than us. And before we knew what had happened, you had captured the space. Right? So, frankly, what we've been doing in India is we are resting on the laurels of the 90s. We came up with a strategic set of moves in the early 90s, and then the UPA government certainly extended those ideas. But now those ideas are running out of steam. And part of the reason Mr. Narendra Modi is having such a tough time is because he's trying to regurgitate the same ideas from the 90s that frankly are no longer working. So I think what I am interested in is what are the two or three strategic areas in which India can make big moves. We were having a breakfast this morning and the gentleman was saying, 500 schools. No, not 500 schools. How can India, for example, make a move in healthcare or set of moves in healthcare that makes India the leader of healthcare globally? Finished, the end. Right? So what I am curious to understand, and we are searching for it in the Congress Party, and we have some ideas, frankly, what are those two or three moves that look much more like the Green Revolution or look much more like the telecom revolution that we can work on and hopefully hit out of the park? And that to me is what is missing. We are talking over the last, and I would put the Congress party post 2008, 2009 in this bracket. We are talking incremental. And frankly, with the changes we are seeing, what is being done in India today, what was done in 2010, 11, 12, is incremental. It's not going to work. We need to think exponential. And for that, we have to target particular strategic initiatives. And that's what I am thinking of doing. Sorry, that's a very long answer.
No, I welcome the answer. In fact, sometimes my questions are long. The next one is going to be, you rightly touched on vision, taking a breathtaking breakthrough rather than incremental steps, which is exactly how the leadership here performs.
That's what they've done.
That's what they've done.
If you, sorry to interrupt, but if you came to Dubai 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and I meet people who tell me that, you simply could not imagine that Dubai could achieve what it's achieved. That's the type of thing that I'm talking about.
Yesterday, the ruler of Dubai, the prime minister of the country, had a session looking at the 22nd century. You said Dubai is the model city of 21st century. He's thinking in terms of 22nd century. He's asked his crown prince to think of the next 50 years with specific set goals. So what's the leadership view in terms of, India is certainly the largest democracy. It's certainly one of the largest populated countries. It's got huge infrastructure needs. So how do you see this? I mean, incrementalism is one thing to be avoided, making sure that you make a breathtaking step. But how do you make sure that the country as a whole gets together and is behind this vision?
It's by the way, you said incremental should be avoided. No, it should not be avoided. Incremental is the minimum that we have to do and we should do. Yes. But incremental is not enough. And so we need 1 or 2 or 3 strategic spaces where we need to operate strategically, not incrementally. I travel around India quite a lot. I've probably easily been to every district, been to huge percentage of the blocks in our country. There is a crisis in India. A crisis is jobs. We can talk about growth, we can talk about anything we want. But nobody who is looking at India carefully can get away from the fact that India has a massive job crisis. And all the talk means nothing if we cannot give our youngsters jobs. It means nothing. You can tell me that you're growing at 9%, 10%, 11%. I want to see the job numbers. How many youngsters are you giving employment to? That's a central question that frankly the government today is failing at. Even the UPA government, we did our bit, we did pretty well, but we didn't do what we should have. We didn't hit the ball as hard as we should have. So part of this strategic thinking that I'm talking about is related to jobs. And the country has to get away from ignoring this problem. Today, you ask any youngster in India, bhai, karte kya ho? And they wave their hands and say, kuch nahi karte. But that's not the feeling that you get when you talk to the government. That's not the feeling you get when you talk to the leadership. The feeling you get is, oh, everything's all right. Everything's not all right. And so that, to me, agriculture, which is related to the jobs issue, related to the food issue, and jobs. How to transform agriculture from a liability as viewed today to a massive asset, which it actually is. And how to use the agricultural structure, agricultural connectivity to create jobs close to the farm, which includes things like cold chain, which you mentioned, includes things like food processing, includes things like infrastructure to bring Indian food to this plate, right? And plates like this all across the world. So we have to start thinking, when it comes to agriculture, we have to start thinking globally and thinking of it as an asset. These two or three things, of course, then, in order to do that, you need to look at education and healthcare. And the idea that poor people in India can have affordable healthcare and affordable education is central. But that would be the broad set of ideas I would think about. Whenever India decides that it is faced with a problem, and whenever India accepts that it's faced with a problem, it solves the problem. Very often, India has a huge problem and India refuses to accept it, in which case it doesn't solve it. And that's exactly what happened in the Green Revolution, exactly what happened in Telecom Revolution, exactly what happened in liberalization. So we have to come to terms with the fact that that's where we're standing right now.
Rahulji, there is the media here in every home, across the world actually, where they're tracking what India is doing, what the Indian leadership is doing, what's happening on a day-to-day basis, what's happening in the parliament. And corruption is one issue which doesn't seem to be going away. It seems to be the big elephant, not just in every room, but in the parliament as well.
It's a huge elephant now.
It's a huge elephant now.
It's got wings.
Yes, well...
It's an elephant with wings.
My point is, what are your ideas in terms of tackling it? For instance, in my view, that corruption stems from political funding. Parties need to fight elections. They need 10,000 crores for Lok Sabha, I'm told, 5,000 crores for state elections. It's that where it starts, the businessmen contribute. Why not make it transparent? Why not allow political donations? Why not treat it as an important pillar so that the parties disclose their financials transparently? We've got a number of accountants here and qualified professionals here. Why don't the political parties publish their financials, audited financials?
There's, first of all, centralization of power and lack of transparency are central to corruption. The Prime Minister came with a vision of fighting corruption. And then he proceeded to attack the very institutions that are designed to fight corruption. And you've heard it. You've heard the Supreme Court Chief Justice. You saw what happened yesterday. I mean, please explain to me why the CBI chief has to be fired twice in a row. Once at 1:30 at night. And then again yesterday, in such a hurry. What's going on? So, number one, those institutions that combat corruption, empower them. Give them the space. Number two, the rules and the laws that help fight corruption. We passed a Lokpal bill. We passed a right to information. For many years, there was no information commissioner in India when Mr. Modi came to power. So the idea that you will get rid of corruption by centralizing power, no. And that's the central thing. You want to fight corruption, decentralize power, make things transparent, absolutely. Make it transparent, make political funding transparent, no problem. But also, when it's blazingly obvious, absolutely crystal clear, that corruption has taken place, and there's no doubt about it, do something about it. I mean, say something about it. We've had debates in Parliament. The Prime Minister doesn't open his mouth.
Rahulji, in a similar context, the decorum, discipline, the harmony in Parliament is not there. Important bills are being held up. Many issues are not being discussed. There is a lot of ruckus in the parliament from time to time, almost at every parliamentary session. Not just now, but in the last 10, 15 years. How can we call them honorable parliamentarians, honorable members of parliament, if their acts are dishonorable? What are your views?
You know, before I went into parliament, I thought about it like this. There are multiple forces at play in India. India is, in terms of complexity, much closer to Europe than it is towards any one country. India is a massively complex negotiation that is taking place. So what Parliament is actually doing is managing that negotiation. That discussion that you see, that's chaotic. You paint everyone with one brush. We do. You know, 5 people standing in the middle of the room, nothing's working there. But let me tell you, there are parliamentarians on both sides, all parties, that are extremely dedicated, extremely knowledgeable, have a really good understanding, and are working their tails off. So, what's important is the institution. And sometimes you will have in a country like India someone, you know, making a noise and saying I'm not happy. Okay, fine, but that's the process. I'll tell you a story that really impacted me. I was in Parliament, and there's a guest gallery over there, and I was watching these guests who had come. Normally when MPs come from other countries, they'll sit in a particular gallery. And we were in government then, and I was watching the gallery, and I noticed these MPs from other countries that had come. And I had mentioned to one of my friends who was sitting next to me that, look, this is quite shameful, that we've got these MPs coming, and look what is going on. There's such a ruckus going on. As it happened, those 5 or 6 MPs wanted to meet me. So they came into the room. They came in my room, and, you know, we started a conversation. So the first thing I said to them was like, listen, you know, I was sitting in my parliament, and I apologize from our parliament side because you had to see this huge ruckus. And there were 5 MPs, and one of them was a woman. She started to cry. So I got a bit surprised. I was like, why is she crying, of all things, right? So I said, why is she crying? And then she told me, Mr. Gandhi, you don't understand what you have. So what is it? She said, well, the thing is, you see, I come from Afghanistan. This thing that you're doing here in the parliament, no. This shouting that you're doing in parliament, we kill each other with guns. People die. So you should be very happy that you have a parliament that is dysfunctional and that is working. And I'm telling this story because it's important to understand.
It lets out the steam.
It doesn't just let out the steam. If you do not have that negotiation, and that negotiation is going to be conflicted, it's going to be complicated, it's going to be unpleasant at times. If you do not have that complication, then the alternative is guns. And that's something that India should realize and be very proud of. It's chaotic. But don't underestimate how big you are. Don't underestimate that, you know, 1 in every 6 people is represented by that House of Parliament, Indian House of Parliament on the planet. And it has to be chaotic. So this is something I'm very proud of, and I'm actually, I'm okay with a little bit of the tamasha that goes on.
Good answer. Excellent answer. Excellent answer. Rahulji, many of the stalwarts here are from the private sector. And, you know, the governments here have encouraged them. They have flourished. The policies have been very supportive. There is specific, you know, there are no distinctions in terms of the law. You know, any businessman is as good as any other businessman. When it comes to a conflict resolution, it is done fairly and squarely. The Indian public sector has been very good. It has been, you know, commanding heights. They have set up the infrastructure. But now they need to move and let private capital find its way. Let joint sectors find its way, especially in the sectors that you're talking about, agri-processing, agriculture, cold storage, etc. Making sure that you free up the economy, open it up a little bit more in a very well-regulated way. What are your thoughts on that?
I would directionally agree with you, but I would not dismiss the public sector in strategic areas. So, for example, going back to the Rafale issue, I wouldn't simply dismiss HAL and push it aside, 70 years of experience, multiple different aircraft, and just push it aside for somebody who's never designed an aircraft in his life. So I do think that there are certain sectors, strategic sectors, and food processing is probably not one of them, right? But strategic sectors where you would say, no, actually, we do want one public sector player who demonstrates a particular type of excellence. I mean, the best technical institute in India, private or public?
They're started by the government, but increasingly the private sector is supporting them. They're taking the talent, experienced talent coming.
So what I'm saying is that sort of puts that's a strategic position that you say, listen, this is what quality is and IIT happens to have it. So there would be some spaces where I would say support the public sector, but broadly, and that would be 75%, I would agree with what you're saying.
Rahulji, now turning to Mr. Rahul Gandhi, the persona. You grew up in Delhi, Dehradun, you studied in Harvard in Florida, and then in Cambridge, and then you returned to India, and I heard that you set up the first technology company in Mumbai, business ops. So tell us a little bit about your childhood. You had tragic bereavement. How did you cope with it? How did your parents shelter you from the media attention, from the political fallout? Tell us a little bit about the persona. Just in concisely, in about 10 minutes, 5 minutes.
I had my grandmother, and then I had my mother and father and my uncle when I was small. And so in my house, or in our house, there was almost like a blanket of love and affection, particularly from my parents and from my grandmother and my uncle. So it was a very protected environment, and everything wasn't comfortable because they were competitive people. So whether it was my grandmother, or my father, or my uncle, my mother, they're competitive. So they will not let you be comfortable. They will put you in situations which are uncomfortable. Challenge you. Yeah, and generally disturb you a little bit, right? But you felt protected until 1977. And that was the first time we saw the political conflict. And then that was suddenly police coming to our house, tear gas being fired inside our house. So then it was like, okay, what is this? And still we had that love and affection. So even though this Dadi was going to jail, Chacha was going to jail, tear gas in the house, quite a ridiculous atmosphere, we were quite comfortable. In fact, if you asked my sister and me, we were like, oh, those were the best days, when there was action going on. It's strange. Then, next one was Dadi's death, which was, you got a sense that, okay, somebody that's very close to you can suddenly disappear and violently disappear. And then, again, Papa's death was different than Dadi's. Because Dadi's death, we sort of suspected that something could happen. Papa's death, we were certain. So in Papa's death, we had no confusion that Papa's not going to die. In Dadi's, it came as a surprise, maybe. But a very interesting thing happened to both me and my sister as a result of this combination of lot of affection and love and then sudden dramatic violence. Which is that we don't hate people. We don't dislike people. We find it very difficult to, Sam will tell you, we find it very difficult to hate and think badly about people. Just this, I don't know how this happened, because intuitively you will think that if someone had violence done to him, he would think that violence is an option. But strangely, it showed me the complete inefficiency and ineffectiveness of violence. It's a strange thing. If you had told me that that's how I would react, I wouldn't have been able to say yes, that's how I would think about it. So, I have gone into a situation, into a thing where when somebody is being violent towards me or being angry towards me, I'm curious as trying to understand what is it exactly that's disturbing him about me. And I don't let his anger or his hatred fire up the anger or hatred in me. And I've found in my life and in my politics and in my work that this is an unbelievably powerful thing. So that would be broadly, I went abroad, and I went abroad with the idea that I need to step outside this ecosystem that I'm part of. I remember when I was going to the United States, Papa asked me, why are you going? Why don't you just stay in India? And I said that because I want to see what this thing looks like from outside. And so it was almost education that I was trying to do to myself, saying, okay, I can see what this looks like from inside here. I want to understand what it looks like from outside. And so I went out of my way to sort of distance myself from the structure. And then I did strategy consulting I was in college, and then I was in America and then in England. Yeah, and then I did some strategy consulting for 4.5 years. And we're not a business family at all. And frankly, don't understand business in the least. And so I wanted to get a sense of how one thinks about business. It was quite an education for me, because it was a completely different way of looking at the world. And so I was working with Monitor, and I was working with some of the multinationals and trying to work out strategies. So it gave me an analytical capability. And then I came back home, and we had the sort of beginnings of the current sort of, hardline thinking. So I thought I wanted to sort of stand against that idea. And I think this last election loss, this was the best gift for me. And that's why I keep saying I learned quite a lot from Mr. Modi and the BJP, because they really taught me how to think about Indian politics, how to listen to people, how to understand what's going on, and so how can I be angry towards them? So I think that's in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, I couldn't.
The power of empathy and love.
No, also see, normally, I grew up in an environment where power was a constant. Now, when you grow up in that environment, you have a sense, and anybody who does, you slowly, you get a sense that, listen, I know, I understand things maybe better than that other person. Because you don't receive the same type of feedback, right? And slowly, you realize that no, actually, everybody's point of view is valid. And understanding and skills come from what and how you do. So, I'll go to a farmer in India, and I will go with the idea that he is the world's expert on farming. Or I will go to a carpenter in India and I go with the idea that he's an expert, global expert on carpentry. I will not go there saying, listen, I know. So whenever I'm having a conversation, I'm actually going with the idea that the person I'm talking to, however irrational he might seem, has a point of view that is valid from his perspective, and I got to understand why that's what it is. And I've found, not only do I respect it, I find it's an unbelievable tool. Because I will learn things that I could never even have imagined from people who I would, if I was using the other model, say, there's nothing I can get from this gentleman. So the idea, and it's deeply ingrained in me, and it's frankly a Indian spiritual idea. It's there in Islam, it's there in Hinduism, it's there in Sikhism.
I'm told you did Vipassana.
Yeah. That knowledge is decentralized, that you can go find knowledge anywhere around you. I'm answering these questions too long.
No, I'm glad we are bringing you out. Let me ask you a question about startups. You started life, you set up, as I said, business ops as an entrepreneur. And there are a number of sons and daughters of Indian businessmen here, professionals here that want to set up new businesses, set up SMEs, MSMEs as you advocate, and they wanted to see it grow. So how would you support? I mean, the present government is also very focused on MSME. Would you support it? Certain issues doesn't have to be, partisan. It has to be apolitical.
I think if you go back to where we began this afternoon, India has a job crisis, and that job crisis can only be tackled by small and medium businesses. It cannot be tackled by the very large businesses. It is when those small and medium businesses become big that you will start to tackle that problem. So I'm absolutely dead certain that small and medium businesses, which are the backbone of India, need to be supported. Entrepreneurship needs to be supported, and an environment needs to be created for them that is supportive. But I also think that, and I differ with the Prime Minister here, fundamentally, I think there is also a space in India for the informal small and medium businesses. The so-called jugaad, that you see in Dharavi, or that you see in Delhi, or you see in small towns, which is an expression of entrepreneurship, which is not necessarily formal. It is informal. Yeah. So I don't believe in the destruction of that system. I believe, of course, that system eventually will reduce. But I believe that system brings a lot of power to India, and that system needs to be worked with. It needs to be supported and developed. I don't think it needs to be crushed. And demonetization, for me, was a disastrous attempt at formalizing the informal, which frankly which people don't realize. Those job numbers that have just come out, 1.2 crore jobs gone. You can put at least 50% of that number straight to demonetization. He is the entrepreneur. I'm maybe a political entrepreneur. I'm not a business entrepreneur. But I would say to my friends who know a lot more about me, a lot more than me about business, but I'm sure this works in your work in entrepreneurship. Humility and listening to others. These are very, very powerful tools.
We can't agree
They're
more.
underrated. You know, but they're really, they're powerful.
One final question, Rahulji. You mentioned about how we have to respect institutions, build them, and one institution is marriage. I hope you could know where I'm getting. It's some people call it institution. It has almost become an industry. There's wedding planning, there is wedding preparations. These are all professional services, etc. So, what are your views, and when can we expect to see the First Lady of the Congress, Indian National Congress?
First Lady of the Indian, you see, the thing is, the Indian National Congress is an extremely clever organization. And the people who understand it will know. And what the Indian National Congress has done is it has given me so much work and has made me run around so much that I don't have much time for.
We'll help you find the time.
Yeah, no, this is a serious issue because I really actually am forced to pretty much go non-stop. You know, from Madhya Pradesh to Chhattisgarh to Rajasthan to Karnataka to Gujarat, it just continues. So, but I think at some level, I'm also, you know, I come from India and I do believe in destiny. So when something has to happen, it generally tends to happen.
Having on that note, thank you very much, Rahulji. Any final message for the NRIs, for the business and professional community here? Anything that you would like to? Yeah. Any final message for the NRI and the Indian business community, the professional community here that is present in large numbers?
I'll make you reflect on one thing. I spoke about strategic moves. And you can say there have been 4 or 5 strategic moves in the last century. The number one strategic move was independence. Who led that?
The first NRI.
Exactly.
Mahatma Gandhi, yes.
It was a set of NRIs that actually led that idea, led that movement. They went abroad. They had a set of ideas. They brought those ideas back and they helped awaken India. They had a role in it. They helped awaken India and start the modern journey. You go to the White Revolution, you must have heard of Mr. Kurian. He was an NRI. You go to the Green Revolution, the scientists who developed that, they were NRIs. Our dear ex-Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, liberalization, NRI. Sam Petroda, telecoms, NRI. So, realize something, that whenever India does something strategic, it is led by an NRI. And
I couldn't have given a better answer.
no, this is the truth. That India does strategic action when its people go out and bring back new ideas. So I don't just want to have a conversation with you like this. I don't want to just say, answer 5 questions and then I go home and you go home. I'm interested in having a relationship with you. And some of you might agree with my ideology, some of you might disagree with my ideology. I don't care. I want to have a relationship with both those who disagree and agree with my ideology, because both ideas, all ideas are acceptable. You have a role to play. And when you're talking about things like representation, these are small things. These things, please, one Rajya Sabha seat, I mean, this is nothing for what you've done.
We won't argue if you give us more.
Yeah. So, absolutely, that's a step. But what is the value of Sam Pitroda's contribution to India? How do you value it in Rajya Sabha seats? How do you value what Mahatma Gandhi did, or what Kurian did, or what Manmohan Singh ji did in? This is invaluable. So what I want to do is, and I want to tell you, and I want to assure you that my doors and our doors are open. And if there is something that we can help you with, we are more than happy to do so. But there are things that you can help us with. And when I say us, I mean India. I don't mean Rahul Gandhi or just the Congress party, I mean India. There are things that you can help us with because you have tremendous insight, tremendous understanding, and tremendous passion, and we would very much like to engage with you to utilize that to build our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rahul ji. I think those were outstanding, stirring words. And thank you, Dr. Sam Pitroda. I think you have been a friend, philosopher, guide, a mentor to the family. And I think it's good to see leadership of this caliber and magnitude. This is excellent for the Indian democracy. It's excellent for the vibrant, vital democracy that we are. And on that note, thank you very much, and we would like to felicitate you now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. May I request now our distinguished Governor, Dr. B.R. Shetty sir, to please come up on stage to present the memento to Rahul Gandhi ji. And may I also request our distinguished Governor, Vijay Malhotra ji, to please come on stage and present the memento to. Please, sir. Please, sir. May I request Azad Mupans, please come on stage, sir. Mr. Vijay Malhotra, sir, to present the memento to Sam Pitroda, sir, also. Sam, sir, thank you so much for your time and for all your support. Thank you so much. And if I may request for one group photograph as well. May I request our chief guest for one group picture? Thank you very much. It was indeed a great India dialogue session, reimagining India ahead. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our chief guest, Rahul Gandhi ji, Sam Pitroda ji, and special thanks to our Board of Governors, our Chairman Suresh Kumar sir. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon. Thank you so much. May I request all of you to please stay back for another 5 minutes. Please remain for 5 minutes, please. I would request your patience for just 5 minutes, please. Thank you so much. thank you all for joining us today for this special edition of India Dialogues, Reimagining India Ahead. Thank you all. Thank you so much.